My name is Salena Marlow. I am 33 years old, and I live in the enchanting city of Florence, Italy. To most people, my life would seem quiet, perhaps even uneventful. I work in a small but beautiful library tucked between cobblestone streets and cafes, where the smell of old books mixes with the aroma of roasted coffee drifting in from outside. It's not the kind of job that others dream of, but to me, it once offered the comfort of simplicity. People came in looking for books, for silence, for answers in pages written long ago. And I was there to help them. For years, I thought of myself as ordinary, someone whose life flowed in the background of the world. I smiled at strangers, I stacked books neatly, I gave directions, and I kept my little apartment tidy. It wasn't happiness, but it was safe. That is, until something happened, something small, almost unnoticeable at first, that began to change the way I saw myself, my past, and my future. It all started on a grey Tuesday morning in January. The air was sharp and heavy, the kind of cold that lingers in your bones. Florence looked different on days like that, the sun hidden behind clouds, the Arno River darker than usual, and the streets quieter. I remember standing in front of my mirror that morning. My hairbrush moved slowly through my dark hair, my face pale against the dim light filtering in through the curtains. My eyes looked tired, older somehow. I told myself, "You're just exhausted. A coffee will help." But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't exhaustion, it was emptiness. For 3 years, I had lived alone. My last relationship had ended without drama, without shouting or betrayal, just a slow drifting apart that left silence behind. After that, I stopped calling friends. Slowly, messages went unanswered. Invitations grew fewer. Even my best friend, Lucia, eventually stopped trying when I always found excuses to stay home. My evenings became quiet rituals: dinner, dishes, a book in bed. The world outside moved on, and I stayed still. That morning in January, staring at my reflection, something shifted inside me. I whispered to the mirror, so softly it almost disappeared into the air, "Is this it? Is this all I'll ever be?" It was not a dramatic cry. It was not anger. It was a fragile question, but it cut deep. For the first time, I realized that I had never asked myself what I truly wanted from life. I had followed every rule: study, get a job, be polite, don't make trouble. Yet still, I felt hollow. Later that day, something unusual happened at the library. A girl walked in. She couldn't have been older than 15. She wore a blue hoodie, her hands clutching a worn notebook. Her eyes darted around nervously until they landed on me. I smiled and asked if she needed help. "I'm looking for a book," she said. "Something about changing your life with your thoughts. Is that real?" Her question surprised me. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had heard of such things: the law of attraction, the power of mindset, but I had never truly believed. Still, I guided her to a small section of books. She picked one called The Power of the Mind. As she held it, she whispered, "I want to believe this can work." Her words stayed with me all day. Even after she left, her voice echoed in my thoughts. That evening, when I returned to my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Could our thoughts really shape our lives? I opened my laptop and searched. Articles, videos, talks all about mindset, energy, belief. Some sounded exaggerated, like magic spells. But some made sense, simple truths hidden in plain sight. One sentence struck me more than anything else: you are living the story you keep telling yourself. I froze when I read it. What story had I been telling myself all these years? I realized that my inner voice had been cruel. I had told myself that I was plain, unremarkable, unworthy of love. I told myself my time had passed, that my life was fine and I should be grateful, even when I wasn't happy. I had been surviving, not living. So I decided to do one small thing. I started keeping a journal. Each morning, I wrote down 3 things I was grateful for. Sometimes it was simple: the smell of fresh bread from the bakery below, the warmth of my blanket, the way sunlight touched the rooftops. At night, I forced myself to write one kind sentence about myself. At first, it felt awkward, almost false. I wasn't used to saying good things about me. But I kept writing. After a few days, I added something new. I began to write down not just what I was, but what I wanted to feel. I feel strong. I feel loved. I feel excited to wake up. At first, they were only words on a page. But slowly, a strange thing happened: they began to seep into me. I walked a little taller. I smiled more at strangers. One evening, with trembling hands, I dialed Lucia's number and heard her surprised but warm voice. Weeks passed. One Sunday afternoon, I wandered into a bookstore in the heart of Florence. The smell of paper and ink surrounded me, and I browsed without purpose until a title caught my eye: Rewriting Yourself. My skin prickled. I bought it without hesitation. That night, I read the first chapter, and a single line echoed in my mind: every thought is a sentence. Every sentence builds a story. If you keep thinking the same things, you will keep living the same life. I could not sleep. I lay awake, thinking of all the sentences I had been repeating. I am invisible. I don't deserve more. I am tired. I can't change. The next morning, I tried something bold. I stood in front of the mirror, looked into my own eyes, and said aloud, I am not invisible. I am not weak. I am important. My voice shook. Tears blurred my vision. But it was the first time I had spoken kindness into my own reflection. From that day, I made a rule. No more cruelty. If I made a mistake, I would say, I'm learning. If I felt lonely, I would say, I'm growing. If fear came, I would whisper, I can handle this. The changes were small, almost invisible at first. But people began to notice. One afternoon, a coworker at the library said, Salena, you look different. Happier. I smiled, unable to explain everything, but inside, something warm bloomed. One evening, while tidying my apartment, I found an old photo from my university years. In it, I looked radiant, full of hope. Back then, I had dreamed of writing children's books. I had forgotten that dream. For the first time in years, I asked myself, what if it's not too late? That night, I opened a blank document and began writing. The story that flowed was simple, about a shy little fox afraid to speak, who slowly found his voice. It felt like a story about me. Each day, I wrote a little more. Some days, the words came easily. Other days, I stared at the screen for an hour. But I didn't stop. 3 months after I first met the girl in the blue hoodie, she returned to the library. She looked brighter, lighter. She smiled at me and said, "The book helped. I feel better now." I told her, "You helped me, too." She looked puzzled but smiled wider. That moment felt like magic. I realized that even small encounters could change lives. Not long after, my manager asked me to help organize a children's reading event for World Book Day. In the past, I would have declined. The thought of standing in front of people would have terrified me, but something inside whispered, "Say yes." And I did. For days, I practiced. I read aloud in front of my mirror, my reflection my only audience. On the day of the event, around 20 children gathered on the floor, their parents at the back. My voice shook at first, but as I read, I grew steadier. The children laughed at the funny parts and clapped at the end. A little girl ran up to me and said, "That was really good. I want to read more now." My eyes stung with tears, not of sadness, but of joy. The next week, my manager called me into her office. She smiled and said, "Salena, I've seen a big change in you. You're confident, warm. Would you like to run a monthly reading group for teenagers?" My old fears stirred, but I remembered my mirror words, my journal, my small promises. "Yes," I said. "I'd love to." That evening, I sat in my apartment and cried quietly. Not from sorrow, but from pride. For the first time in years, I felt proud, not for being perfect, but for being real, for trying, for saying yes to life instead of hiding. The reading group began small, just 5 teenagers. They were shy, unsure. One boy, Marco, reminded me of myself, quiet, withdrawn, always at the edge. For weeks, he said little. One day, I asked gently if he wanted to read aloud. He said no. I didn't push. But the next week, he whispered, "Maybe I can try." His hands shook as he read 2 pages, but he finished. I told him, "You did wonderfully." He smiled, just a little, but it lit the room. I realized then how much it matters to have someone believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself. During this time, I submitted my fox story to a small online magazine. I didn't expect anything. But a month later, they wrote back, they loved it, and they wanted to publish it. I read the email 3 times, unable to believe it. I laughed, I cried, I called Lucia, who screamed with joy. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I feel alive." Life kept moving. I began walking more, exploring Florence as if for the first time, the markets, the hidden alleys, the Arno glowing at sunset. I whispered thanks for simple things, a stranger's smile, the warmth of the sun, the sound of church bells. One summer, I took a short writing course at the local college. I was nervous, but I went anyway. That's where I met Daniel. He had kind eyes, a gentle voice. We often sat next to each other, sharing notes and quiet conversations. After the course ended, he asked if I'd like to have coffee. I said yes. What began as coffee turned into long talks, walks through the city, hours of silence where words weren't needed. With Daniel, I felt safe. He didn't try to fix me, he simply listened. One evening, I told him about my journey, the mirror, the journal, the girl in the hoodie. He listened, then said, "Salena, you didn't become someone new. You uncovered who you've always been." His words touched something deep. He was right, I wasn't becoming someone else, I was returning to myself. The seasons passed. Autumn painted Florence in gold, winter brought lights and quiet snow, spring filled the air with blossoms. Through it all, I kept writing. I began a book, slowly, a story about a woman who lost herself and found her voice again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The teen reading group grew. More came each month. They laughed, they opened up, they brought cookies, music, stories of their own. Marco once stayed after to help me clean and said, "Thanks for doing this. I never thought people wanted to hear me before." I looked at him and said, "They do. Your voice matters." On a snowy December night, Daniel held my hand and whispered, "I think I'm falling in love with you." My heart raced, but softly, I whispered back, "Me too." It wasn't dramatic. It was gentle, real, enough. On New Year's Eve, I sat alone on my balcony with tea, wrapped in a blanket. Fireworks filled the sky. I whispered, "Thank you, not to anyone in particular, but to life, to the universe, to myself for not giving up." Now, every morning, I still stand before the mirror. Not because I need to, but because I want to. I say, I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm enough. And most days, I believe it. My life is still simple. I work at the library. I write in the evenings. I drink tea at night. But inside, everything has changed. I used to whisper, "Is this it?" Now I know the answer. No. This is not it. This is only the beginning. If you like this story, please like, share and comment. More interesting stories are coming soon. Subscribe.